Shabbat to one and all. My pleasure to be with you. We're here also with Kirk. Do not have JB this evening. How are you this evening, Kirk?
I'm fine. Good evening.
Good. You feeling better?
I am, as a matter of fact. So it's I'm beating it back a little bit by a little bit. So I'm in pretty good shape. Thank you.
Well, good. We're in the midst of a really very seldom discussed section of the Torah. And, you know, I was a Christian for a long time. I probably was a Christian for the first 35 to 40 years of my life. And I probably started off identifying with Christianity as early as 7, 8 years old, and was very active in youth groups growing up, and then became the youngest ordained ruling elder in the history of the Presbyterian Church. I taught evangelism, became a Stevens minister. I taught Bible studies routinely, led large congregational meetings with a keynote speaker at the General Assembly for the Presbyterian Church on Church Union. And, you know, in all that time, Kirk, I never once heard a single sermon on circumcision. I don't even recall seeing a footnote anywhere on circumcision. Ever.
If they say it at all, they say that was for them. That's not us. But I don't think they'd be open to it.
I don't even think they say it.
Yeah, I can't really put my finger on some big sermon that I recall that was dominated by circumcision. No.
I don't even think I heard a sermon in all of the time I was a Christian on the terms and conditions of the covenant, or the benefits of the covenant.
No.
Never once.
That's tragic.
It is tragic. But I don't get it. How could you have anything any more important? You know, there are, up to this point, there have been 4 conditions for participating in the covenant. And they've been pretty straightforward. They've been shown by example and then discussed by Yah. Like, for example, he specifically has this whole conversation come out of Abram walking away from Ur of the Chaldeans, which was in the heart of Babylon.
Right.
So that's the first thing we know. I mean, Ur was the epitome of man. It was a city that city-state, Sumer, that developed the 6-based counting system. And we use it today. Our clocks are based on a 6-based accounting system. Our calendar is based on a 6. Now, not Yahowah's clock, not Yahowah's calendar, but man's is. Directions.
Absolutely.
You fly a heading of 270 degrees. Well, it's out of a 360-degree 6-based counting system. So many things today are based on the 6-based counting system. Man, however, which was created on the 6th day, is only has merit when combined with God. 6 plus 1 equals 7. The meritorious number, the Shabbat. That's what we are celebrating this evening. So the first thing we learn is that he walked out of Babylon. And, you know, it wasn't, Kirk, that he wasn't like he was had a foot left back in the door. It wasn't like he
was halfway home.
He was halfway home. He was all the way up there in Haran. You know, you can't get any further north from Ur. And from that point, he would turn west and south into the Promised Land. And Yahweh said, you know, walk away. You want to be part of this covenant. Walk away from your country. Well, Kirk, is there any chance that Yahweh would say, walk away from your country to a man who had always already walked away from his country if it wasn't for the fact that this is a condition of this covenant relationship that he is developing with Abram?
Right. Well, there's 2 reasons. He's telling us it's for our benefit to understand, but also there's the walk away is also involved with disassociating from all their schemes and their religions and so forth.
Walk away from your country. All things associated with the country. The fact is that was a very religious place. Was a very political place. Babylon was a very militaristic place. It was a place of really decadent economics. Walk away from that. Walk away from your societal customs. Walk away from your family, your father's house. His father was dead.
Yeah.
His one brother, you snooze, didn't even get out of Dodge. The other one was immersed in all of the hubbub of Babel, and so
returned.
Why would Yahweh say, walk away from your country, from your father's house and your societal customs to a man who had already done all three? If it wasn't for the fact that I gave you this example and I'm now telling you what's important, because this is what you need to do if you want to benefit like Abram did from the covenant.
Correct.
Right? So it's the only reason to tell us these things. And then the next was walk to me and become perfect. Okay, well, how do you do that? How many paths are there in the Torah?
There's only one path.
Yeah, 7 steps. Begins with Pesach. Yeah, it's interesting, by the way, that we're going to go back to circumcision. Pesach is all about circumcision. You're cut off from the society of the dead and dying. Matzah is all about circumcision. You're cut away from religion and politics. Bikurim is even all about circumcision. You're born as a child into Yahweh's family, set apart from the family of man. So he's very clear about what he's walk to me and become perfect. You've got to do that if you want to be part of his family. And then he says, trust and rely on me.
Right.
So that requires you getting to know Yahweh. That requires you being observant of what he has to say and making all the connections necessary to understand it. And it's interesting that, Kirk, on these last two, the walk to me and become perfect and trust and rely on me, he must say in this discussion, because we've covered it so many times. Now, I'm sharing this with you because I want you to make the connections between me and you so that you understand this relationship that I'm developing with you. I want you to understand who I am and why I'm conveying all this to you. He says it over and over again. It's impossible to miss.
Once you read
and then he tells
you
us,
can't go back.
Right, and then he tells us that the method of coming to understand is by being observant. He says, I want you to observe, to closely examine and carefully consider the terms and conditions of this covenant. So each of those things he explains, and he has a statement reinforcing it. And then he comes to this discussion on circumcision. He has more to say about circumcision than anything else in the covenant.
Yeah.
By far.
Right.
Nothing even close to it.
No.
He has said it. He has said it again. We're now on the 6th statement of him restating it.
You can look up the same words on just almost every every statement. You find 4 or 5 of the same things you just said, and then 4 or 5 more. Yeah, absolutely.
Do you think that God's getting old?
For that,
at a senior moment? Or is there a reason for it?
So. No. It's the reason.
You think maybe he wants you to understand that this is unequivocal? That I'm not here to debate this with you.
No.
We're not here to discuss this. We're not here for you to determine whether or not you think this is a swell idea. I'm not asking your opinion on it. I'm just saying that I designed you in such a way you would come to understand and remember this covenant that I have established with you through circumcision. And if it's something you don't want to do, okay, that's your choice. But understand,
but it certainly
you aren't going to be part of my family.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If you decide, it certainly is a way to mark the occasion, indeed.
Yeah. So, Kirk, it's just flabbergasting to me that you could have a religion, Christianity, that claims that their Old Testament is the inspired Word of God, and not say anything about it. Of course, they can't, because they negate all 13 of Paul's letters and Acts, the establishment of their church, if they talk about circumcision, because then they make Paul out to be a liar. And yet there's nobody smart enough in the entire world of Christianity. There's never been a pope smart enough, connected enough, reasonable enough, rational enough. Never been a Protestant preacher smart enough, logical enough to say, who would we rather make a liar? Paul or God? Because that's our choice. Either Paul lied or God lied. We're carrying around the Torah, prophets, and Psalms. We're carrying around this emphatic declaration about circumcision. And yet we believe Paul over God.
Yeah.
We're going to call God a liar so we can believe Paul.
Ultimately,
and there's not a single Christian that's ever figured it out that maybe it's a really dumb idea to call God a liar in favor of one man. And, oh, by the way, how could you call yourself a Christian? I'm a follower of Jesus. How could you say that you're a follower of Jesus, that you're a Christian? And you don't even pay attention to the initial declaration he made to humanity. Do not think that I came to annul the Torah. Instead, I came to fulfill it. Not a single stroke, or even the smallest letter within the Torah shall be annulled, shall be done away with, so long as the heavens and earth exist. Well, there's a hell of a lot of letters in these 7 or 8 statements on circumcision. Jesus lying? Was the God who inspired this presentation of the Torah, was he lying?
Makes him ridiculous if he is.
Yeah. Or was Paul lying, and therefore is your religion based upon a lie? How could you claim to be following the teachings of Jesus if you ignore what he said?
This week, this week I was thinking along the same lines, I guess, as you were, and I ran across a couple of notes that I made. I tuned in to Franklin Graham making a speech about his father, Billy, and I made a few notes, and then I just kind of got sick of listening to it. It made me kind of ill, and I used to listen to Billy Graham. I was not like you. I didn't start young as a Christian. My father wasn't really high on Christianity. We're aware of it, and I'm sure I was baptized in a couple of things here and there, but we just didn't go. It really wasn't until between 18 and 30, a little bit acquaintance of Christianity, and it probably didn't become a Christian. I went all in until about 20 years before I ran across you or your book. So, but Billy Graham I listened to, gosh, he was on all the time, so you tune in.
The tone of his voice was exceptional, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the guy was an orator. I mean, he could grab you, and his message was simple, and it was
all
well presented.
From beginning to end.
Yeah, from beginning to end.
Yeah. Typical 33rd
he did something,
degree
but the notes that Franklin, and the notes I made on Franklin's talking about his dad, I'll give you just 3 of them, just to toss out, and then I made some notes on. Are you kidding me? He said, talking to his father, he said he was a great man with great values.
No, he was a renowned man, an infamous man,
very well known,
with rotten values.
Yes, exactly. He said he made you pause in life to connect with God. Well,
no, he didn't.
Which one?
He disassociated humanity from God.
Absolutely. He said he influenced politicians and governments with his moral and ethical code.
Well, if it's his code, code, or it's the Freemason code that he followed, then it's the code of man. And if he influenced the leaders of this government, who are routinely disgusting,
right,
then maybe they're all disgusting.
Yeah. You know, and then he talked about the Congress, and he was talking to some political leaders that were sitting on the front row or something, and he said, at the end of your life, you won't remember what bills Congress passed, but you will think about meeting your Maker. That was kind of like...
you're not going to ever meet him, man.
Come on.
You and I know where Billy Graham is today. And in Sheol. He's in hell. Yeah. He's in hell with every other Protestant preacher and Catholic priest and pope. That's where he is. Franklin, you're heading there too. The place is called Sheol. You don't know any Hebrew. It doesn't matter that you don't know the name. It knows you, and it'll welcome you. And you know who you're going to find there? Paul. Yeah. Yeah, Billy Graham was among the great curses to humanity. I mean, he's not going to make God's top 100 list of scummiest people who ever lived, but he's up there in the top 1,000 probably. I mean, Martin Luther and Calvin would be way higher than Billy Graham, but he's up there. Yeah. The Vulgate from old Eusebius, Yes. Yeah, there's a lot of religious people. A lot of people there. Well, I wrote a couple of notes, and I'll share with you if you wish. Sure. But, I said he promoted the plague of death throughout his entire career, speaking of Paul and his message. That was without doubt. He was instrumental in the destruction of millions of souls. Yes, he was. He prevented millions more from ever even knowing Yahweh, because once you buy it, maybe some people probably tuned in and they're satisfied with, okay, that's religion, and maybe they walked away, maybe they didn't, but they certainly didn't find the path that Yahweh is talking about here. No, he never talked about the 7-step path to Yahweh. I know Yahweh's name. He did not talk about it. Never spoke of the covenant. No. He never talked about the Moed Mikra. He embraced the very governments and religions that Yahweh asked us to walk away from in step 1. Yep. Yeah, that's kind of why Christianity can't speak of the terms and conditions of the covenant, because the first one has you walk away from your country. And what's Paul's edict in Romans 13? Embrace, obey your leaders. Obey your government. So it's the antithesis. So either God's a fruitcake or Paul lied. Yeah. He never. And if you were just to sit down and think about it, and he's indicative of any major preacher, but it wouldn't matter was Oral Roberts or whomever. He never talked about. He only spoke about faith. He mentioned a lot of times power in the blood, bodily resurrection, the cross, the Bible with veil. Well, the cross is pagan. There is no such thing as bodily resurrection. No. Yeah. Faith is not trust. You can't trust in faith. Is you're trusting that you're hoping. That's a difference in trusting on something. Yeah, that's Paul. You got to be a faith if you're going to be a Pauline Christian. Yeah. There's no power in the blood, by claiming it as yours. He talked of the Lord. He sent people to church after they walk down the aisle. Go back to your homes. Go back to your churches. Right. Yeah. He talked off so many times of Lord Jesus Christ, which you mentioned earlier. I didn't think people back then even had last names. How could he be Jesus Christ? Yeah. I mean, tell me. Man, everybody back then, all you have to do is read what Yosha calls Shimon Kefish. It's Shimon of Yahuchanan. Shimon ben Yahuchanan. Shimon, son of Yahuchanan. he was Shimon, son of Yahuchanan. Yosha is Yosha ben Yahowah.
Yeah.
And he most certainly did not have a Greek name, and no one had a last name. Last names didn't exist for a very long time, and his last name most certainly wasn't Christ.
No.
So he couldn't have been Jesus Christ. Title. No. And that title means drugged. Chrysos is to apply drugs. And, of course, there's no J in Hebrew. And there's not a single letter that is synonymous between Jesus and Yosha. And it couldn't be any more different.
Well, he would never present to you the Ruach Kodesh either in his power.
No.
He talked about the Holy Ghost or the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
So he's either a ignorant man or he's a stupid man for knowing something that he's presenting counter to Yahowah.
I knew one of his I met Billy Graham a number of times, but of course one of his closest friends was Jerry Falwell, and Franklin Graham went to Liberty University, so Falwell knew the Grahams quite well. Jerry Falwell was not a stupid man. Jerry Falwell was a very bright man, and when I met with Jerry and said, here's the reality is almost everything you say and do in your church is Babylonian and is in opposition to God. And he knew it. Franklin Graham knew it too. Billy Graham knew it.
Billy had to know it. And if you don't believe he had to know it, these guys used to hire, none of them, to my knowledge, wrote books. They all had ghostwriters. The going rate, I was told by a rather prominent friend of Oral Roberts, was that it's $50,000. You get paid $50,000 to write one of these books. And if you were a theologian, PhD, Doctor of Divinity, something of that nature, or just a brilliant researcher, and you were hired to do that, surely you had some discussions with the person and said, okay, we need to present this, that, or the other. I mean, how could you, even if you were just not very bright, you have to see some of this stuff and choose to do what you were doing.
Yeah.
Or choose to walk away. I mean, even most of the people in our covenant family have been disturbed about something along the line and just settled because they didn't know what to do, or walked away and just didn't do anything, walked totally away till they found out what the truth was. So they just have no excuse. It's just tragic.
And the place where there is just no excuse. And this is the place where it pains me that, a friend of mine like Ken Power can still quote Paul as if he were speaking for God.
Yeah.
The essence of Pauline Christianity, if you want to just boil it down to what is it that separated Paul from Yahweh, Yosha, and the disciples. And it's a singular thing, and it's presented clearly in the book of Acts, and it's presented clearly in Paul's first letter, that of the Galatians. And it's so obvious that's Paul's first letter and that it's a response, his rebuttal to the Jerusalem Council. The reason Paul was called in to Jerusalem is because he was preaching against circumcision.
Right.
And if you read the book of Galatians condemns, the whole purpose of it is to condemn circumcision and to set up the covenant that's in the Torah as being of the flesh, and circumcision is of the flesh, therefore that is evil, and that faith is of the Spirit and therefore good. The essence of Pauline Christianity is a repudiation of circumcision. That's the essence of it.
Unless your name is Timothy.
unless you're his lover, and Timothy, Paul circumcised. It's delicious, isn't it?
Now it's interesting that in the Dead Sea Scrolls, you don't have a lot of the material that we covered prior to the last week. But from 17:12 through 19, it's all in the Dead Sea Scrolls. Yahweh didn't let that's not a coincidence in my mind that survived.
No, it's all here, and it's irrefutable. And if you look at what the Torah says about circumcision, and you read what Paul wrote, and you listen to what Yosha said in the Sermon on the Mount, there is a 0% possibility that Paul spoke for God, that his letters were inspired by God, that the Christian New Testament is even remotely reliable, or that there is a religion called Christianity which makes a person right with God. All of those things are absolute impossibilities based upon this section that we're reading now. Now, I know a lot of people don't give a crap about logic. They don't care about reason. They don't.
Apparently not.
Exercising good judgment means nothing to them. And I think that's the majority of people.
Mm-hmm. That's the snoozers.
But being stupid isn't going to play when you meet your Maker.
Yeah.
And it just isn't going to work. I'm sorry, I was stupid. No, I was too lazy. I guess I wasn't stupid. I was just too lazy to care. I didn't think it mattered. I just believed. Oh, but certainly, somewhere along your life, let me remind you the places and the times someone told you the truth and you ignored them. It wasn't convenient. It wasn't popular. It wasn't easy. Well, the statement that we ended the program on last Friday, Kirk, is Bereshit 17:13, which is profound in the sense that it is all-encompassing. It says, he should absolutely circumcise him, definitely cutting off the foreskin. It's mulmul. So this means there is no question about this. I'm not kidding around. Circumcision is extraordinarily important. Mulmul. Mul squared, if you will.
Yes.
Of the naturally born, Yalid, naturalized as a member of the extended family through natural childbirth in your home, on your household and family, and also those desiring to be included, as well as those who are acquired with your money. Well, that would be everybody, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
That wants to be part of the family of God.
Yeah, that's why it's appealing to me. I'm in there. I got to be in there somewhere.
Yeah, I'm one of those who desires to be included.
That's right.
This shall be, Haya. This was. This is. This will be. Existing as my family-oriented covenant relationship. Berith. My mutually binding familial agreement and relational accord in the flesh. Bashar. Serving as a means to approach as an everlasting, eternal olam, family-oriented covenant relationship. It's interesting in the Christian New Testament, there's only one place where it is alleged that the Christian Jesus says new covenant. You know what that is? Paul's historian. Paul's attaché.
Luke.
Yeah. Was Luke there?
No. He's not an eyewitness to anything.
Was Paul there?
No.
No. By the way, since Paul was in Jerusalem at the time that Yosha picked the disciples, if Yosha really wanted Paul to speak for him, why wouldn't he have made him one of the 12?
Him up then. Yeah. I think he would have said, "Follow me."
Yeah, follow me. Well, Paul had no interest in following him.
No.
No. So this is an eternal covenant. Yeah, Luke's the only one who said the two eyewitnesses there. One is in Matanya. He was there. The other is Yahukanan. He was there. And in both of them, it's just, this is the covenant. He's having Pesach Passover. He's celebrating Pesach Passover, and he's talking about the role of the bread, the matzah, the unyeasted bread, and the wine, what they represent, part of Pesach and matzah. That's what he's speaking about. And he says this is the covenant. He's affirming what we've come to know, that the path that enables us to walk to Yahowah and become perfect begins at Pesach and matzah. That's what he was saying. This covenant is everlasting, which means Paul lied. You know, and we just keep on emphasizing, Paul lied. If you don't like it, then stop being a Christian. Tear his books out of your Bible. In fact, tear the cover off that says Bible. That means with Baal. Baal's the Lord. It means you're still in Babylon. So, Paul lied when he said, oh, that covenant existed until this says it's everlasting.
Yeah.
Paul lied. If you believe him, you're a fool. If you rely on him, your soul is toast. You are sacrificing your soul. If you mislead other people so that they rely on him, then you're going to Sheol. Good riddance. All right. That is followed by, therefore, the uncircumcised male, Zakar, the one who fails to remember this, who relationally, Ashur, by association, is not circumcised, Lomul, flesh of his foreskin, that soul shall be cut off and shall be excluded and banished from her family.
Yeah, this is the damning verse.
So when Paul said, if you're circumcised, then, you know, the cross and Christ cannot avail you, what God is saying is exactly the opposite. If you're not circumcised, you're a man and you're not circumcised, then you are disassociated.
Come to the door.
Right. Yeah, and for someone to, like my friend Ken used to do, he tried to wiggle around Paul's lies by saying, you know, well, it's spiritual circumcision now, and spiritual circumcision has been replaced in Christianity with baptism. Where in the hell does it say that? How do you get around baptism will resolve this, you will be eternally excluded if you're not circumcised? And how do you get spiritual circumcision when he says, of the flesh?
Okay, then why did the apostles not start baptizing everyone? Why didn't Paul and all his group go out and start talking about baptism? They didn't do it. I mean, there's no evidence for that. So that's an invalid argument to begin with. There's no historical account for any of that.
Yeah. Bottom line is circumcision. Therefore, the stubborn, and we talked about Aral a lot in our last program. Therefore, the stubborn, the unresponsive, the untrusting, the unreliant. Therefore, the faithful. Those unwilling to listen, those who are unobservant, those who are not separated and willing to be set apart. Aral addresses every Christian I've ever spoken to, every Muslim I've ever spoken to, every political activist I've ever spoken to. Every single one of them is unresponsive. Every single one of them is untrusting and unreliant. Every single one of them will not listen to evidence or reason. None of them are observant. None of them are set apart unto Yahowah. Therefore, the uncircumcised, the stubborn, responsive, the untrusting, and the unreliant, those who are unwilling to listen, who are unobservant, who relationally, by association, does not know the proper way or the benefits of the relationship, and is not circumcised with regard to the flesh. of his foreskin. We're just going to drive this point home. God is very seldom this explicit. You know why God's not usually explicit? People have a tough time with that, religious people in particular, when you say God's not explicit. But the fact is, he isn't. Yeah. For example, he does not tell you what you should do on the Shabbat.
Correct.
Does he?
No.
There are not a lot of things that God is explicit about. This is explicit. Therefore, he's saying, be circumcised with regard to the flesh of his foreskin. That's explicit. Now, the reason God's not typically explicit is because if he gives you an explicit answer, there's no need to think. There's no need to make the connections that lead to understanding. There becomes
he wants you to dig it out.
Actions without thought. It's like the Billy Graham calls people down and says, come down here. Well, every head is bowed, and come down on your knees and recite this prayer. You don't have to think. Don't bother to think. Just follow after me. Say what I say. That's why God's not explicit. He wants you to think. Understanding is what is important. He said it over and over again in this discussion. And so here, however, he is explicit. No circumcision of the foreskin, that soul. Now, what's interesting is a soul kirk flesh?
No.
So he transitions here from the flesh of the foreskin. He's saying if the flesh of your foreskin is not circumcised because you are stubborn, unresponsive, untrustworthy, untrusting, unreliant, unobservant, which means you are not, what he's talking about there, he has listed the first 4 conditions of the covenant.
Right.
If you've ignored the first 4 conditions of the covenant, that's what Ariel says. Stubborn, you're not walking away from your country. You're not responsive when God's calling you out of your country. You're not trusting and reliant, which you have to trust and rely on him.
Right.
You're unwilling to listen. You're not observant.
You're not examining, thinking about this. No?
Unwilling to be set apart, which is what happens when you walk to God to become perfect. Yeah. So if you've ignored or rejected the first conditions of the covenant, don't know the way, and are not circumcised, you don't have your priorities right about this binding promise to ward off the curse with regard to the flesh, bashar, of your foreskin. That soul. So interesting transition. And I think it's missed in English Bibles because they say that person. But nephesh isn't that person, it's that soul.
No, it's always a living soul.
Right. So by not being circumcised of the flesh as a man, your soul is what's cut off. So people want to translate at the end of this where it said her family. I've written her family. Means her people or her family is the primary definition. It could also be her nation. But you do not exclude souls from nations. People are excluded from people. Individuals are excluded from nations. Souls are excluded from God. So the consequence of not being circumcised cannot be banishment from Israel. It cannot be banishment from the Jewish people. Cannot be.
And that's the way it's translated for those who haven't read that recently. Right. And that's exactly how they twist it.
Right. They render soul incorrectly as person. You know, there are Hebrew words for person. Is an individual person. Adam is a man who is descended from the first man, Adam. Ish is mortal man. There's lots of Hebrew words for person. Nephesh isn't one of them. Nephesh is your soul. And so by not being circumcised of the flesh, the consequence is your soul is banished. And because it's soul that is being banished, then there is no other option than to translate he, which is H-Y, as her, family. Her family is the covenant.
Yes.
Which is the previous statement. What did he say? An everlasting covenant? Isn't that how the previous statement ended? An everlasting covenant?
Right.
So when he's talking about, and the covenant means family, and so if he's saying you're going to be excluded from her family, which family do you think he's talking about?
Right, Kodesh, his family.
Yeah, it's the covenant family.
Covenant family.
And your soul will be excluded from the covenant family. Is it possible to meet your Maker, to enter heaven, to have eternal life, to be forgiven, to be saved, without being part of the covenant?
That's the way it is.
And if you're not circumcised, you can't be part of the covenant.
That's right. Can't even make the first.
You don't like it.
You
don't like it. Go ahead and argue with God over it.
No.
You're not going to get anywhere. But if it's something that bothers you, I can't believe God would condemn my soul to hell just because I'm not circumcised.
Just
what about the poor old guy that never read about this but lived a good life? Yeah. Poor old guy that never read about this but lived a good life. Yeah, he's not going to hell. But the person who's arguing with God over this, and they are. By way of association, now, just in case you didn't know that the family here was the covenant, just because of the fact that English Bibles are translated by devious men and women. And I was going to say morons. I said, no, that's not fair. They're not morons. They're not stupid. They're devious.
No, they're yeah.
Because not only was the covenant, everlasting covenant, the last statement in the previous statement, the last two words, after her family here, what is it he's referring to next? By way of association, is what that means. They violated by creating two separate variations, thereby disassociating themselves from my family-oriented covenant relationship. You're not circumcised, your soul is excluded from the covenant. If you are not circumcised, then you violated and broke the conditions of the covenant. As a matter of fact, God's really in the Christian's face here. He's saying that the way that you broke it, parar, is you created two separate covenants, two different variations. Well, where does the other variation appear? Because it sure as hell doesn't appear in the Torah, prophets, and Psalms. It sure doesn't appear in the words of Yosha.
No, it's
who created the myth of a new and different, separate variation of the covenant. Where did that first appear?
Yeah, that's in Galatians.
That's absolutely right. And then reinforced, in case you just want to say, oh, well, maybe Galatians wasn't Paul's best effort. Well, it certainly wasn't Paul's best effort. It's a piece of trash. Vindictive. Contradictory. Obviously untrue. But Paul's great treatise, Paul's ultimate letter is to the Romans.
Yeah, that's his
He says the same thing in Romans, that there's a second covenant, and the new covenant is of faith. This says that if you have created a separate variation of the covenant, then you are absolutely in violation of the one and only covenant. And that covenant isn't for them. Covenant is for God. It's his family.
You know, we got very excited when you did Habakkuk or Chabuk, and because it was so in your face to Paul. I dare say that this is more in Paul's face and Christianity's face than anything in the Torah.
Yeah, I would agree. And what's, of course, interesting here is that Chabauk makes a big deal about circumcision, and it speaks of Shaul being in opposition to circumcision, except when he wanted to expose the male genitalia of Timothy, which it also speaks of. God has condemned Pauline Christianity in this statement, and if you are a faithful member of the Christian church, shame on you. This hypocrisy that's saying that you're worshiping God, that you're uplifting God in prayer, that you believe in Scripture. Rubbish. You're a fool. You're dishonest with yourself. The next statement, 17:15. God said to Abraham. By the way, we're now moving away from circumcision. I've had the 8 statements on circumcision. We're moving away from circumcision. Did God give us any wiggle room away from it to discount what He said?
If you can find it, I'd like to read it, but no.
Yeah, if you will. I'm not sure I would like to read it because
no.
The answer is no.
I read it
no,
he didn't say that. But,
right. No, he didn't say that. Yeah, and he didn't say, this is just for. Never did he say this is just for Israel.
No.
Ever.
Well, he's saying that there is no Israel.
Right. Of course, because
he can't say this
is
for Israel. There ain't no Israel.
That's correct. Here. There is no Israel at this point.
So that's not an argument. So scratch that one from your list.
Yeah, there wouldn't be an Israel until Jacob was renamed Israel.
Oh, yeah.
God said to Abraham, so as for you, Sarah, your wife, and Sarai, your wife, you shall not actually make a habit of calling her by the name Sarai. Sarai means noble woman, wife with status.
Right.
But instead, Sarah, leader with royal birth who is empowered nobility as a leader. It's kind of interesting. That's what they would tell you about Sarah. As I look at Sarah, I see it as to contend and strive, to engage and endure, to struggle and wrestle, to be empowered and persist, to exert oneself and to persevere, and to be free, even to have a royal birth.
Well, I looked up Sarah, the root and everything, and it says to turn the head into another direction. So that's key in this. He's moving from what her status, like out of Babylon status, and more to his direction. And it's also something that you grapple with, because one of the definitions was also one who has authority, but it is a heavy burden, they are heavy from the weight of the authority. She's a very important person. There's a lot of this is quite a heavy mantle. So she's having to deal with, strive with, contend with all the same things that those of us have to deal with. So it's not a great noble person. It's a really earthy thing that's now happening. She's a woman who has to it's right in the middle of Israel, contend with.
She is the basis of Yisrael. Is individuals. Sarah, who contend and strive, who engage and endure, who struggle and wrestle, who are empowered and persist, who exert oneself and persevere, who are free. And then El, with God. And
so, I mean, it's in there.
There are some that I've gotten some letters here recently saying, I don't like saying that they don't like contend to be one of the definitions
maybe
of
contentious.
Sarah.
Yeah.
Well, contentious and contend are appropriate. And they say, well, why would you name the people contentious with God? Individuals who are contentious with God, individuals who contend with God. Why? Because most of Yisrael has been contentious with God for a very long time.
Yeah, from start to finish.
Right. Now, Yisrael defines both those individuals who have come to engage and endure with God, who have been liberated by God, as well as those who still are wrestling with Him, who contend with Him, who are contentious with Him. It's both.
Well, there are people that are struggling with the message right now that have joined, just begun.
Correct.
Their journey.
Oh yeah. If you're a rabbinical Jew, if you're into Judaism as a religion, you are, even at this very moment, you're struggling with God.
Mm-hmm.
You're contentious with Him. You don't even like His name. You'll call Him Hashem.
Hashem, yeah.
Yeah, and you'll choose to believe the Talmud over the Torah, and that's the choice that you have made. But instead, Sarah, to contend and strive, to engage and endure, to struggle and wrestle, to be empowered and persist. One of the things I think is interesting here too is that this has all been about Abraham. And Abraham represents Yahowah, merciful Father. That's what the name means. Yes. To be Father who enriches, Father who empowers. And now we've talked about circumcision and being part of Yahowah's family. And what do we find? We find that the first name that is being explained and changed is Sarai becomes Sarah. So this covenant, this eternal covenant family that has been formed through these 5 conditions of the covenant, because now he's finished. This is the 5th and final condition of the covenant. He is now creating the basis of not only Yisrael, but he's coming up with the basis of the covenant family. The covenant family is comprised of father, mother, and son. And in the perfect sense, it's Yahowah, the Ruach Kodesh, the set-apart spirit, our spiritual mother, and Yosha. And the sense of the rest of us, it is still Yahowah, the set-apart spirit, and the rest of us is children. But while Abraham represents our Heavenly Father, Sarah represents the set-apart spirit.
Heavenly Mother, right.
Yeah. That's one of the reasons it's her covenant. The set-apart spirit's her covenant. The mother of the covenant family is Sarah. She's the mother of those who engage and endure with God. Yeah, it's
a big deal.
She is not a small player here. Her name is important. Her role is important. What she represents is important.
Now, why is it that it's so obvious that names are so important to Yahowah, and translators work so hard not to use their names?
Yeah, I mean, Abraham and Sarah are one of the two that actually get right.
But other than that, you look at them and they just twist them back and forth, and it's amazing to me.
Yes, yeah, it's very few that they get right, and it's why, for example, do they get this one right? It's hard to know.
Maybe Yahweh's doing a little job there on them.
I don't think most people don't realize.
They probably don't look hard enough to even get that, But
no. So I don't know what the reasons are. Anyway, the next statement is, and I will choose to kneel down and bless. I want to lower, diminish, and humble myself out of love, to commend, to provide favor, greeting and welcoming her contribution to reconciliation and to a better and enriching circumstance for humankind through her. And also, I will literally give you a son from her. So now she's been renamed, and the very first thing we learn about her is that she's going to be a mother, and she's going to give birth to the first child of the covenant. But more important than that, we learned that Yahweh himself is going to get down to lift her up.
Yes, for rock.
Yes. Isn't that marvelous?
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of the things that has always bothered me so much about religion, Christianity in general, is that they all have man bowing down to God, praising God, lifting up God with prayer. And you think of it, just how stupid that would be. I mean, why would a being who is vastly superior create an inferior being to worship him? Moronic. It's disgusting. And the notion that we, as an inferior being, can lift up a superior being is equally moronic and stupid. But he sure as heck can lift us up, and does, and explains that. I mean, that's what is being explained right here, is that he can and will lift us up. And he gets down on his knees to lift up his children, because the children that are born into this covenant are God's children. That's why he, as our Heavenly Father, gets down on his knees to lift us up. This is what fathers do. This is how he's explaining his role. Might be a small line, but it certainly conveys a great deal.
Well, you won't hear it anywhere else. That's the sad tragedy of it.
It is.
Outside of our family group.
Yeah, hard to understand how anything could be more important. Now, I do think that this is not the end of it, even though this is the conclusion of God's presentation of the terms and conditions of the covenant. And it is, and it's interesting that he concludes not only with the fifth condition being circumcision, but he then concludes by explaining Sarah's role and what he's going to do through Sarah, get down on his knees to lift us up. It wasn't that Abraham and the son that he would have, Yishak, were just automatically assumed. Well, we had this whole conversation, therefore it's assumed that, you all are going to be part of my family forever. It was like Noah. When Noah heard Yahweh, he walked away from the societal customs. He walked away from the community that he was part of, and he walked and listened to God. And when God said, hey, Noah, I want you to build an ark. If Noah hadn't acted upon what Yahweh said, then he and his family would not have been spared. Now what we're going to find out is that Abraham and his son Yishak are going to be tested.
Yes.
Now I had somebody the other day who wrote me, how do I know when I am really saved, where I've done what I needed to do? I'm sure. When can I be sure of my salvation? I understand the terms and conditions of the covenant. I understand the importance and the relevance of the 7 Moed Mikra and how they play into this. I know who Yahweh is. I know the importance of the Torah, prophets, and Psalms. I understand all of this. When do I really know? Well, passing this test.
Said, but go ahead and share what you said.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, passing this test is, by the way, how you know. Yeah, what I shared at the time with this individual is that we never stop learning. Ever.
Agreed.
Our knowledge is never complete.
No.
Our understanding is always growing. Therefore, it is never at a point where you could say, well, I now know everything I need to know. It not only can't happen in this life, it can't happen in eternity either. We must always be growing. We must always be learning and coming to know. So this idea of reaching a point of completion, oh boy, now I've done it, I can
I can sit on my cloud and play my harp.
Yeah.
No,
that is never going to happen. That is never going to happen. Now, as for me, and I can't speak for everyone because everybody is a little different in terms of, well, the path to Yahweh is the same. How we approach him is all a little different because different souls, different personalities, different aptitudes. This question of knowing when I understood enough or I had acted on enough to know that I was part of Yahweh's family never crossed my mind. You know, I don't see it ever crossing Dode's mind.
Mm-hmm.
It was somewhere along the way I was translating Yahweh's testimony, and it was obvious what he was conveying. It was obvious he could be trusted. And I realized it wasn't me that had to have perfect knowledge and perfect understanding. It was Yahweh who had to be perfect to do what he had
He can't
said.
drop anything. Right. He's got to live up to it.
Right. So
his promise.
My inclusion in the covenant family, while there were things that I had to act upon and come to understand, it wasn't based upon my perfect understanding or my perfect response. It was about trusting and relying on the one who is perfect. And what I also shared with him, so for me, it was never a question, because I was never worried about when I was good enough, because good enough was immaterial, or when I understood enough, because understanding was always increasing. It was just reinforcing. It was always the realization that it's Yahweh that I'm trusting here, not me. I'm not trusting me to have responded.
No.
I'm trusting him and the offer that he made. And then the last thing I remember sharing was that somewhere along the way, though, you do reach a point where you have had so much reaffirmed that you just know. I mean, downright in your core. You know. That's what I recall having written him. Yeah. And right here now, we're going to have Abraham pass the test. And I don't see anywhere here where Abraham had a difficulty with this test.
No, he didn't struggle to walk up the hill. He didn't hesitate to walk up the hill.
Even when his son asked him the ultimate question, hey, Father, I see we got the wood and we got everything else. Oh, where's the lamb for the sacrifice? Oh, Yahweh will provide the lamb. He knew.
Yeah.
He, so what we're going to review now, we're moving out of 10 into chapter 11. It's called Passing the Test. It's an open book test. There are no trick questions. None of this is hard. Abraham was not the smartest dude who ever lived. You know, I think that Abraham was specifically chosen for this task because he's the everyman.
Yeah.
Sarah was the every woman. There is nothing exceptional about Abraham or Sarah. They passed the test. And you might say, well, of course, why wouldn't they? God reached out and talked directly to them, performed these miracles in their presence. Of course they passed the test. Kirk.
Not necessarily.
Kirk, well, I will agree that when Yahweh took Abraham to heaven and to the seventh dimension and allowed him to understand this correlation between light and of the stars and eternity and perfection and being enlightened and enriched and becoming immortal and perfected. When Yahweh did those things, that okay, that's pretty impressive. But other than that, I don't see where we are at a disadvantage to Abraham.
No,
we have all of this laid out for us. Yeah. We have it written for him. We can look at it in context. We can go back over it. We can review it 100 times. You know, we really have a lot of advantages that Abraham didn't have.
Absolutely we do.
So,
he had nothing in writing. He had no Torah.
Right.
In the sense that we, like Moshe. Right.
Right. So there is an argument can be made that we're in a much more powerful position, a much more enlightened position than was Abraham, and that we ought not be of the opinion that, well, of course it was easy for him, but it's, you know, what about for us? You know, God hasn't done these things personally for us. Well, yeah, he has.
That's the same argument that Christians used to have about, I need a sign, you know, give me a miracle.
Yeah.
Listen, you can keep your sign, your miracle. Honest to God, I know that sounds funny, and once upon a time it probably wouldn't come out of my mouth so easily. I can sit here and go through the entire Masoretic thing, check against the Dead Sea Scrolls. I can look up every word. I have everything at my disposal. I could increase my library, yes, and get a little more depth and stuff. But there's so much to dig out, and the same thing as you were talking about earlier to the person who wrote you the letter. I don't know when it really happened to me that it was when I thought I was all in, probably earlier than I may have been, but I'm on the page with him. I don't worry about nothing. I mean, I don't worry about nothing. I'm old. I got aches and pains. I worry about those things because they're just irritating. You know, you get sick or something. But I don't worry about nothing, man. This is everything. Any question I would have, I know where I can go to, and I can go to Yah because he and his Torah are synonymous.
Yes. Yeah, I don't have every answer at this point. Somebody wrote me and made a compelling argument that the Shabbat does not exist on Friday evening and only exists during the daylight hours on the seventh day on Saturday.
Well, then you
I know I know they used the story of matzah and made a nice argument in favor of their position. I think there's many other arguments which speak in favor of it being the whole time, but you know, I'm not going to claim to be dogmatic and say, well, no, that person's wrong and I'm right. You know, in terms of details and perfect understanding, we don't have it, and it's kind of the advantage of being humbled by the fact that we're still growing and open to other ideas.
Okay.
But when it comes to the answers to, here's the 5 conditions of the covenant, these are the 7 steps that we walk to God. It's just
that you can hang your hat on.
Yeah, you can hang your hat on that. The Torah being reliable.
Yeah.
Yeah, those things are certain. So this is the first statement. It's we find it in Bereshith, Genesis 22:1. And it came to exist. Haya. After these words, Akar Debarim, that the Almighty, Ha Elohim, attempted to ascertain the understanding and examine the appropriateness of their response by testing Abraham. So he said to him, Abraham? Then he conveyed, look up and pay attention to me. Well, that's a pretty interesting start, isn't it? Mm-hmm. So the very first thing we learn here is that God begins this with the verb that is the basis of his name, Haya, and it came to exist. So it literally happened with ongoing implications. After these words. So this is in context. God did not test Abraham prior to him being certain that Abraham knew had been given the answers to the test. You know, he didn't start with a test of Abraham when he met him on the road out of
what's going on.
Right.
Right. That's right.
Same thing is true with us. Yahweh is a fair teacher. He's a good teacher. A good teacher provides you with not only the answers to the tests, but the ability to understand those answers before they test you on them, and they only test you on that which they have taught you. Yahweh is the world's best teacher. That's the way he operates. So it was after these words. That makes these words that Yahweh has shared with Abraham vital to our understanding, because those words by akar, which means following these statements, akar ha dabarim, following these statements, after these words, then is when the Almighty attempted to ascertain and this is a great word, nakah, attempted to ascertain the understanding, to examine the appropriateness of the response by testing. And this is another place where, an English Bible would just say, and that God tested Abraham. There's a problem with that. Are you okay? Test is one of many valid translations and an accurate translation of nakah. But nakah means a lot more. It means to ascertain whether or not somebody understands, to examine whether or not their response has been appropriate. Well, isn't everything that is in terms of the terms and conditions of the covenant, the way Yahweh has presented them to Abraham and therefore to us, been based upon A, understanding, and B, response?
Yeah, of course.
So the test is based upon understanding and our response. That's all we're being tested on. Do we understand, and what is our response? Think of how important that is.
He declared him perfect, so he obviously felt at that point that he trusted and relied on him. So yeah. I mean, it was so there was plenty enough evidence that he could go ahead and test him even stronger, and that more is. I still believe that's got a lot more to do about us hearing it than him doing it. Yeah.
So Abraham is not being tested on performing a miracle, is he?
No.
No. This is not the Salem witch trials where the alleged witch is put up with a rope, and the rope is going to break if they're not a witch, or thrown in a river with rocks around their legs, and they'll float.
They'll float if God's with them. Yeah.
So the test here, there was no skill being tested. It wasn't a question of Abraham having to perform some mighty feat. He didn't have. This is no jihad here. There is no bowing down and praying. There's no declaration of faith, is there?
No, none whatsoever.
No. The test is on two things. Understanding. Was his understanding valid? Mm-hmm. And was his response based upon that understanding appropriate?
Mm-hmm.
Well, following these words, did he understand what God had shared with him? As we have devoted, the last 6 months of this program, we have been devoting it all to understanding, not just knowing what God said to Abram about the terms and conditions of the covenant, but understanding it. Yes. Why? So we can respond.
Mm-hmm. Well, what good would be
understand and respond. And if you don't, listen, Hasatan understands that Yahweh is God. He understands that the covenant is God's family. He understands that the only path to God is through the Moed Mikre. Is his understanding of any of that going to do him? Yeah, is that his understanding of any of that going to do him any good?
Not at all.
Not at all. Why? Because he responded inappropriately.
Right.
You know. So, well, you can't respond appropriately until you understand. Understanding alone is not sufficient. Understanding is the prerequisite of a proper response, but without that response, you're not part of the covenant. Noah saw the covenant affirmed before his eyes, saving his family aboard the ark with the rainbow. Noah clearly understood what God was saying to him, but until he responded, it didn't matter. He had to respond. You know, we're told, and Noah acted upon everything that Yahweh had said to him. So the test here, and I'm repeating myself, and I don't apologize for repeating myself. Naka, the test here is, do you understand what God said, and is your response to what God said appropriate? He wanted proof of the education, of the knowledge, of the comprehension, and even the consideration for the consequences, and therefore decided to evaluate the acumen, the judgment, the ability to make rational decisions, and the validity of the forthcoming actions during a situation involving challenging circumstances to assess. I followed a car today, and the bumper sticker is it's enough to be kind. We should only be kind. And I wanted to just to slap the cell phone of this person that was driving out of her hands and say, would you be kind to a rapist? Why don't you tell me how being kind to a pedophile is a good thing? Do you think being kind to a mass murderer is appropriate? Why is just being kind enough?
Yeah.
Just be kind. No. It's such rubbish. And so God wants to say, you know, the fact of the matter is, I really don't want anyone as part of my family who can't think, who won't think. If thinking's not your thing, then just don't want you in my home. Yeah. Eternity with God and His family is going to be with people who like to think, who make the connections, who are observant and have come to understand, and then have responded to Yahweh, God, in the appropriate way.
You have to be a great thinker. You can do this.
Right.
I'm proof.
Yeah. Yeah, at no point did he say that you have to be a
physics or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. There is no requirement here to be perfect. The requirement here is, do you understand, and have you responded appropriately? Now, I can be accused, and maybe rightfully so, of tooting my own horn every time God says something that reinforces or affirms something that not only do that I have come to know to be true, something that maybe I'm the first person in a couple of thousand years to have figured out and then shared, or something that I think is essential, I mean paramount, to our relationship with God. And I will make a big deal about when God affirms one of those things. And I don't know how to remove myself from that because it's a celebration, and I'm sharing it, but it's a celebration. This is one of those great celebrations, because the thing that I came to learn, Kirk, really early in the process is that the path to God, there's only two things that enable us to transition from mortality to immortality with God: understanding and responding. That's it.
That's what I was going to say, yeah.
There is nothing else. Not being good, not worship,
no,
not faith, not charity, not religion, not patriotism, not heroism, nothing.
Nothing else you can do beyond that.
It's understanding and response. You cannot come to God unless you understand what He has said. You just can't. You can't approach God unless you respond to His invitations. And it is one of the things that just differentiated Yada Yahweh and Intro to God and now Observations for Our Time and all these programs. It is that God can only be known through observation, which leads to understanding by taking what you come to learn and making the connections necessary for comprehension, and then acting upon what you have come to comprehend, to discern. That's it. God has just reinforced that. Peel perfect. During a finite period of time, the object Abraham, would endure the effect of a comprehensive test and would be totally influenced by the result. So it came to exist after these words, that the Almighty attempted to ascertain the understanding and examine the appropriateness of the response by testing Abraham. And He said to him, it's interesting, called him out by name. Names are important. If God's going to form a relationship with you, He knows your name. And He said to him, Abraham. Then He said, look up and pay attention to me. Henna. Henna is very much like the verb that lies at the heart of Yahweh's name. The only difference between henna and haya is that henna and haya both start and end with a hey, of someone standing up, reaching up, and looking up to God. Right? The only difference, and henna and haya would both be feminine, and that they end with a hey, and any Hebrew word that ends with a hey is feminine.
Right.
Okay? So that means that Yahweh's name, by the way, is a feminine name. Most people would be uncomfortable with that, but God has masculine and feminine characteristics. All right. The difference is that haya, the verb that comprises the basis of Yahweh's name, it has a yod, a hand in the middle of it. So it's the two people, Abraham and Sarah, reaching up to God with God's hand reaching down and out to them with an open hand. Henna, tension, has a nun in the middle of it.
Yes.
Sperm. That the first people that passed through this and tried to define these little characters said, well, it's a root. Well, roots go down and don't go to the side. It is a sperm, but even if it were a root, let this take root. But it's a sperm. So it's a child that is born, and it's kind of interesting that Ben, child, and it's based upon home, Be'eth, and Nun, a sperm, a child born into that family. That's when a house becomes a home. But henna, look up to me and pay attention. If you want to be my son, and now he's talking about the children of the covenant, to the seed of Abraham and Sarah? Look up and pay attention to me.
Well, I'll add one little thing to that. There's
okay.
The two Hays are engaged people who are observing.
Right.
And then if you have a nun, which also means a continuation of the family, but let's just say continuing. So the henna is a continuing, someone who is continually observing and responding because they're engaged. When your legs are apart, you're walking down the path.
Right.
So it's
right.
fraught with symbolism of,
right.
Marvelous word, Hannah.
So the first word we have here is that this look up and pay attention to me. So the very first thing, the first word of this test has Yahweh saying, Henna ani. As you said, stand up, look up. Pay attention to me. Reach up for my hand if you want to be my noon, my child. You want to be born into the covenant family, my family. That is the first step we all take if we want to be part of God's family. We've got to look up, stand up, engage. So the very first word defines exactly the answer. You know, you're not down on your knees. You're not religious. You're not bowing down. You don't view God as a Lord. You're viewing Him as a Father. You're reaching up for His hand, and in so doing, you're becoming His child. Lovely introduction, isn't it?
Yeah.
Single most important thing. Yeah, I think it's the single most important thing that anyone, by the way, can do is reach up and realize that Yahweh's name is based upon us standing up and reaching up to Him, because that's what a loving Father wants to do with the child.
Yeah. Great thought.
So we have come to an interesting spot where God is now going to systematically tell us everything we need to know about how we go about passing this test. And He's going to tell His story His way. So I think this is a good place to pause. We've reached our...
Can I ask you one question before we go?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Last week, when we were on 17, or I think it was last week, 17:11, in your translation on 17:11, the first word on the circumcision, you use malal. And the reason I was talking about a nun and the 50 was because in the Codex Leningratis, the word used for circumcision there was namal, and that's why I was talking about a 50. Was there a reason that you used the other one, or is it because I couldn't find it in the Dead Sea Scrolls, so I don't know. I looked through two other interlinearies. And I still came up with 5243 namal in there, so which I thought was even stronger there because it was talking so much about to discontinue and terminate. You know, it was very whereas both of them mean circumcision. But was there a reason you changed that or used that to it?
I'm certain as I was going through it, that's the word that was in the interlinear that I was using at the time. And that's what appeared. But again, which I know you mentioned a 50, and I didn't see the 50, so it's probably a good thing that you're bringing this up.
And while I was reading, and I said, in addition to that, we're talking about being set free, and that's the nun, and nun is a 50, and all of a sudden it occurred to me that duh, your bell.
And this is 17. Yeah, this is 1711.
So 1711. And my linear said it was namal 5243, so that's the only one that's in there that it uses namal that I can remember. Everything else is malal or mol.
Okay, and you're talking about the second word. It's ma'al.
Yeah. Namal.
Of
lam.
Of 1711. All right, I will check that out in our next program, and I'll have an answer for you as to what the word was, but I like both words. Ma'al means
yeah,
you shall make a
well,
declaration.
I did a comparative study between the two, and it wouldn't make much difference. But I thought, well,
yes.
God, what did I miss here? Or do I need another interlinear?
Yeah. The reason I like Ma'al, and I guess and maybe it could be that I made a mistake
I ain't
here.
picking on you.
I love the word because the word is all about making a declaration, truthfully proclaiming the story of circumcision. Make a declaration by being cut off and separating.
Isn't that amazing how much Yahweh talks about circumcision? Yeah, I never thought of it, even though I'd read all this before. I was just, as we've been going through it, it's just amazing. If this ain't a slam, look, Paul, look, Christian.
17:11 is where it begins, and actually 17:10 is where it begins.
Yeah, I was going to say
the second statement of 17:10. So 17, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17. It's 8, 8 statements. Circumcision is about eternal life. There's 8 statements on it.
Yeah, amazing.
There's more statements on circumcision than Yahweh explained basis of the Shabbat. I get asked a lot, could you do a program on Shabbat so we understand really how we should be observing it? And one of these days we should probably do that. But God has more to say about circumcision than he does Shabbat.
Yeah. You have to like
Clearly
this guy.
Important.
You have to really like it.
Yeah. It's going to make certain that, there really is a test. There really are conditions. I'm not just going to let everybody in. All paths don't lead to God. That's what he's trying to make clear here. There really is a covenant. There's a way that I want you to remember the covenant. There's an aspect of this covenant. It was Jackie that sent me an email and was talking about how the foreskin is the only thing that can be cut off. Of the male that is wholly beneficial.
Yeah.
Lots of health reasons, lots of benefits, and no downside. The decreased risk of urinary tract infections, reduced risk of sexually transmitted disease, protection against both cancer and cervical cancer for sex partners, prevention of inflammations. It just goes on and on in terms of the benefits, but it's beyond that. It's Yosha himself was circumcised of Yahweh, set apart. Diminished, a corporeal implement of Yahweh. That's the Pesach lamb. Then he's cut off in the flesh, opening the only door to eternal life. Now again, circumcision is the only flesh that can be cut off and discarded for the benefit of the family, the only door, and only then could Yosha's soul descend into Sheol to cleanse his heirs from the diseases of religion, politics, and militarism, resulting in us being born anew by way of our spiritual mother into his covenant family. Yah's only plan for life in his home, symbolically explained in Ma'al. And it all begins with Pesach. That's why Yahweh says, if you're not circumcised, you are not going to participate in Pesach.
Well, if Yosha said the wide path leads to destruction, the narrow path, this is the only group of people in the world that are following the small path according to what Yahweh said. So,
correct. How much
proof do you need? I mean, it's sad that it's not a larger group walking down the road, but it's absolutely no other path it could be but this one. This is the one all of us cling to, and unfortunately, it's a very narrow group. It's a very narrow path, and only a few of us go. Relative to
it's the only path presented in the Torah. There's only one.
Yeah,
this is the only path that's presented there, and since the test that Yahweh is conveying is after all of these words, and after he has conveyed the path to Abraham, That's the only path.
And
you might say, well, there was the path that led them out of Egypt, out of Mitzrayim, the crucibles of human oppression.
Yeah.
That path began with Passover, Matzah, and
but it also led them to the Torah.
Right, leading right to Shabbat. Right, so
right to
that
Shabbat,
path,
right.
That is the same path. And you say, well, what about Yosha, Christian Jesus? What about he fulfilled.
First of all, there was no Christians then.
Pesach, Matzah, Bakurim, and Shabbat.
Yeah.
Same path.
And he celebrated all of them all his life.
Yeah.
7 times a year.
He fulfilled the first 4, same path.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason he didn't fulfill the final 3 is that once we're empowered, Towrah is all about us. Right. Towrah is all about us. Trumpeting
for you. I mean,
Right. That's for you to fulfill. Right. And and I'll bring you into my home when the time is right, and I'll do my part to fulfill Towrah. Yah was saying, but between now and then, Towrah is your opportunity. And of course, Yom Kippurim cannot be fulfilled until Yahweh's prophecies say it will be fulfilled.
Mm-hmm. And we know a multitude of those that are right on the edge of being fulfilled. Right.
That's when, and that is when Yah was talking about in Yirmiyah 31, where he's specifically talking about the reaffirmation of the covenant with Yisrael and with Yahudah, and how they are restored in a relationship to him, integrated back into the Torah with his name written inside of them, and his Torah, his teachings written inside of them, the Talmud extracted from them. Well, that's when Yom Kippurim is fulfilled, the very last days. And, of course, he could not have fulfilled Sukkah, although he arrived on Sukkah, but Sukkah is fulfilled 5 days after his return. There is only one path, and it's the exact same path that Yosha walked, that Abraham walked, that Dode celebrated, that the children of Yisrael walked as they left the crucibles of human, religious, and political oppression.
Wow. What a great presentation. Well done.
Yeah, thank you. And we'll move obviously into the what I think is one of my favorite chapters. Well, I think chapter 10 of Observations for Our Time is essential. Chapter 11 is every bit as rewarding and instructive to me. I love the idea of God testing our understanding and testing our response, evaluating our response. I just think that's a marvelous thing. I want him to do that. There has to be a filter.
Here's an easy question before I go. I did a painting of Abraham with Yitzhak. Are his hands bound, Yitzhak's? Wow. Always depicted that way.
Yeah.
I can't remember.
Yeah, I don't recall him.
Whether he says that or not, but that's...
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure that being accurate is important. I just don't recall, and we're going to get into it because chapter 11 is going to lead us right to that moment, and we're going to cover everything
that was yet, but I will. But,
everything that was
curious.
said.
It came off the top of your head because I was curious. Say, why you got his hands tied? He would have trusted him. I said,
Yeah. Well, it's
so it's tough on us artists.
Yeah, it's certainly there. In fact, I can go right. Let's see. Let's go right to the end of it now and see what it says. I don't know where that particular particular section because ends because the chapter goes way beyond it. You know, it's Exodus in the chapter, so the chapter goes way beyond it. So here, were his hands actually bound? My thinking is yes, but I'm.
Well, if you're acting it out, it tells the story. If you're painting it, it tells the story, but it doesn't necessarily have to be so. And it's a valid question when Terry said, "Well, do they?" And I said, "I don't know. You know, I hadn't thought about it." And then I forgot about it for a while until we was talking about it today. And I said, "Oh, you know, I got to finish that painting one of these days, just for fun."
Yeah. Let's see here. You know, I have not. Let's see.
That little dog is supposed to come in.
Okay, yeah, went way too far down. Yeah, there's the ram, so it's got to be. It's got to obviously before this. Okay, do not stretch out your hands. We're getting close.
Right there.
I'm going back called out to him. Yeah. Okay. Next, Abraham stretched out his hand. He grasped hold of. Okay, that's after it. Okay. Then he came to the place. When they came to the place, which bestows the blessings of the relationship that the Almighty had told him about, Abraham built an altar, and he arranged the wooden planks. Then he connected these things together with Yishak, his son, positioning him accordingly before the altar, in conjunction with the upward and ascending nature associated with the wooden pillars. And Abraham stretched out his hand, and he grasped hold of the knife to move in the direction of his son. So the only way that he could have been bound is for us to translate this word. Let's see, the verb would be, so he built the altar, built his bana, which is to restore the home and the family name, and he arranged the wooden planks. Then he connected these things together, a cod. He fastened them together with Yishak. So there is, a cod can be either, you know, he fastened Yishak to them, or but it's Yishak, not el Yishak. To Yishak would be el Yishak. It's eth. So eth is with. Connected these things together with Yishak. So is it the possibility that Yishak was tied to it, fastened together with them, or is this symbolic language that Yishak was free? He was just associated with the
altar,
the altar and the wooden planks, the upright pillars of wood, if you will. Therefore, Yishak serving as a representative of what Yosha would be on Mount Moriah.
Well, he voluntarily went there, but he was bound.
Right. So
but he did it voluntarily. So I don't know whether
helps or not. And I don't know that Yosha's hands were bound either. He was certainly nailed.
Well, I think if you were flogging somebody, you would have had them all tied up, and by the time he's such in a weakened condition, he wouldn't have had, because he wasn't going anywhere in that condition when you walked him out to the upright pole.
Yeah, certainly possible. But no, so the answer to the question is maybe. Depends on how you translate a cod.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll go to work on that. Thank you very much.
Oh, sure. All right. Good night, my friend. My voice is beginning to fade. Evening.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to keep it so long. I beg your pardon.
No problem. Yeah. Good night.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.